Imagine a 1,500-year-old empire. I mean, this is the direct, unbroken heir to the mighty Roman Empire. But it isn't dying in some sudden blaze of glory.
Right, it's a slow burn.
Yeah, exactly. It's slowly, agonizingly bleeding out over 400 dramatic years, and its final breath. It isn't taken in some quiet, shadowed political backroom.
Oh no, not at all.
It happens amidst the deafening roar of 500-kilogram cannonballs just smashing against stone walls that had stood, absolutely invincible for 8 centuries.
That image perfectly sets the stage for the massive stack of historical sources we're pulling from for today's deep dive.
We've got a lot to cover, right?
We really do. We're looking at comprehensive texts like the Cambridge History of Turkey, some really deep dive historical essays from Column Global, and detailed encyclopedia entries.
And these cover everything from the rise of the Seljuk Empire to the ultimate fall of Constantinople. Our mission today is to unpack this epic multi-generational collision between the fading Byzantine Empire and the rising Turkic powers.
Because what you quickly realize when you read through these sources is that empires don't just fall overnight. I mean, they crumble.
Right, they disintegrate.
Yeah, through this bizarre mix of horrific blunders, miraculous reprieves, shifting global economies, and, honestly, some profound betrayals.
Definitely. And to really understand the collapse of 1453, you can't just start at the end. You have to go back to the event that cracked the Byzantine shield forever.
Setting that 400-year timer, basically.
Exactly. You have to go back to the year 1071.
Right, the Battle of Manzikert. The sources describe this as the first massive shockwave. Can you paint a picture of who the Byzantines are actually facing here?
Yeah, so they're facing the Seljuk Empire, led by Sultan Alp Arslan. And what's fascinating here is that the Seljuks were far from that stereotype of, disorganized nomads riding in from the steppe.
Right. They were a highly organized imperial force in their own right.
Very much so. This was a massive, highly sophisticated Turco-Persian state. By that, I mean they successfully blended Turkic military mobility with Persian administration.
They literally used the Persian language and bureaucratic systems to manage their vast territories.
Which were huge, right? Like they were stepping into this massive power vacuum left by older superpowers like the Abbasid Caliphate.
Yeah, exactly. At its height, the Seljuk state covered nearly 4 million square kilometers. And at Manzikert, Sultan Alp Arslan rides into battle wearing a white robe.
Which symbolizes an Islamic funeral shroud, right?
Yes. He is signaling a complete readiness to die. And the result of that psychological intensity is something that just shocked the entire known world.
The Byzantine Emperor, Romanos V Diogenes, is captured alive on the battlefield.
Oh.
Which is just wild.
It really is. I mean, the first time since antiquity that a Roman emperor was taken captive by an enemy.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because, reading through the actual casualty reports from Manzikert, it wasn't a massive bloodbath for the Byzantines.
No.
Most of their army actually survived. It sounds like Manzikert wasn't a fatal sword thrust to the heart of the empire, but more like a catastrophic computer security breach.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Right. The battle itself didn't destroy the hardware of the empire, but the resulting chaos left the firewall totally down.
That analogy captures the mechanics of the collapse perfectly. The physical losses were manageable, but the structural damage was terminal. To understand why the firewall went down, you have to look at the Byzantine military structure.
The provincial levies, right?
Right. During the battle, large numbers of these provincial levies, which were basically local land-holding militias, they simply fled. And key commanders from a powerful rival political family, the Dukids, outright refused to engage.
Wait, so they abandoned their own emperor to the enemy just to settle a political score?
They did, and that betrayal ignited a chain reaction. When Romanos was eventually ransomed and released by Alp Arslan, he didn't return to an intact state.
He came back to a civil war.
Exactly. His political rivals captured him and blinded him so severely that he died from his wounds. This internal strife completely paralyzed the empire's ability to defend its eastern borders.
Which opens the door for a massive demographic shift.
The mechanism here is crucial. Because the Byzantine border armies were too busy fighting each other, Turkic tribes were able to migrate freely into central Anatolia.
And they weren't just raiding, they were settling down.
Yes. By 1080, the demographic landscape of Asia Minor was permanently altered, and that stripped the Byzantines of their primary source of grain, tax revenue, and, manpower.
Because the Byzantines lost their heartland. They were forced into a position of sheer desperation. I mean, how did they even survive another 4 centuries?
Well, they survived by applying temporary band-aids and relying on Western alliances, which ultimately led to catastrophic betrayals.
Like the Comnenian Restoration starting in 1081 with Emperor Alexios I, he inherits a completely bankrupt state.
Complete bankrupt. The military is in such disarray that he actually resorts to melting down sacred church artifacts just to mint coins to pay his troops.
That's how desperate it was.
Yeah.
And he also appeals to Western Europe for military aid, which,
Which accidentally helps trigger the First Crusade.
yeah, it was a pragmatic move for survival that backfired culturally in a massive way.
The Comnenian emperors managed to recover some territory, sure, but their heavy reliance on Western European or Latin mercenaries and merchants created deep economic disparities.
Because the Venetians and Genoese started dominating Byzantine trade.
Right. They were enjoying these massive tax exemptions, which created festering resentment among the local population in Constantinople.
And that economic frustration boils over into sheer horror. In 1182, there is a massive xenophobic uprising known as the Massacre of the Latins.
It's incredibly dark.
Tens of thousands of Western Europeans living in the city are slaughtered by local mobs.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that massacre shatters the fragile relationship between the Orthodox East and the Catholic West.
So if you've ever wondered why the Eastern Orthodox and Western Catholic churches still have deep-seated historical friction today, this era is essentially ground zero.
Precisely. And this cultural hatred plants the seeds for the ultimate betrayal, which is the Fourth Crusade in 1204.
This is the part of the sources that feels almost surreal to me. Wait, so the fatal blow that crippled this ancient Eastern Christian empire didn't come from the Muslim Turks, but from Western crusaders looking for a payday.
That's exactly what happened. Driven by Venetian commercial greed and massive debts owed by the crusading army, this massive Western fleet, originally intended for Egypt, was diverted to Constantinople.
And they exploited Byzantine dynastic squabbles to justify laying siege to the city.
Yes, in 1204, they breached the walls. The historical accounts describe 3 days of unrestrained pillage, massacre, and the systematic destruction of centuries of ancient art and wealth.
It's hard to overstate the damage. They literally carved the Roman Empire up into fragmented crusader states.
And even though the Byzantines eventually recaptured the city in 1261, the 1204 sack was a point of no return. The empire was permanently fractured.
Economically hollowed out and lacking a reliable army, which forces them to rely on incredibly volatile mercenary groups just to keep their borders intact.
Right, like the Catalan Company. They're a perfect case study in how far the empire had fallen.
In 1303, the Byzantine emperor hires this huge army of hardened Aragonese veterans to fight off the encroaching Turks. But they couldn't actually afford to pay them.
So the mercenaries go completely rogue. When their pay dried up, the Catalans turned on their Byzantine employers.
They just established their own independent state in Thrace, right?
Yeah, and heavily looted the European countryside. And in the ultimate twist of historical irony, they actually ferried Turkish troops across the straits into Europe to help them fight the Byzantines.
Wow.
They devastated the region's agriculture and left a massive political and military vacuum.
And as we know, nature abhors a vacuum. Here's where it gets really interesting, because a new, highly adaptable power rises from the mud to fill that void.
The Ottomans. And their origin story is fundamentally tied to this crumbling Byzantine infrastructure.
Yeah, in March 1300, heavy spring rains caused the Sangarius River to overflow its banks. The floodwaters washed away the long-abandoned Byzantine river defenses.
Right, in a literal torrent of mud. And the sources describe Turkish herdsmen fleeing the floods and just bypassing the ruined walls. It's symbolically and literally the launch of the Ottoman Empire.
What's fascinating here is this stark contrast in statecraft. You have the Ottomans, starting as a small emirate, expanding organically.
Adapting to the terrain, yeah.
Versus the sheer desperation of the late Byzantine emperors.
The stagnation is palpable. Look at Emperor John V. Paleologos in the mid-1300s. He leaves his empire to travel across Europe, personally begging for money and military aid.
And none of it works. He's even detained in Venice at one point because he can't pay his travel debts.
It highlights a profound shift in geopolitical gravity. John V is eventually forced to acknowledge his total dependence on the Ottoman Emirate, formally becoming a vassal.
The mighty Roman Empire acting as a junior, subservient partner to the Ottomans. And the dynamic just completely flips. I was reading about this incident with the Ottoman leader, Orhan.
Oh, the pirate incident.
Yes. He has a half-Greek son who gets kidnapped by pirates. Could you explain what happens next? Because it's absurd.
It perfectly illustrates who is really in charge. When Orhan's son is captured by Greek pirates, Orhan doesn't send his own fleet. He orders his vassal, the Byzantine Emperor John V, to fix the problem.
The Roman emperor acting as a glorified hostage negotiator.
Exactly. He has to assemble a fleet, lay siege to the pirates, and personally pay a ransom of 100,000 gold coins just to get his Ottoman overlord's son back.
Which is half a ton of gold. It's staggering.
But the Ottomans weren't succeeding just because the Byzantines were weak, right?
No, not at all. They were master state builders. Under leaders like Murad I, they weren't just conquering territories, they were systematically integrating them.
Through that policy of demographic engineering, right? Sürgünler.
Yes. When they conquered new territory in the Christian Balkans, they would forcibly resettle rebellious nomadic Turks and sedentary Muslims from Anatolia into those European lands, achieving two things at once: removing troublemakers from the heartland and planting a loyal buffer population against European counterattacks.
Exactly. They fundamentally re-engineered the cultural fabric of regions like Thrace and Macedonia. And they also revolutionized their military structure around this time with the Janissaries.
This was their most controversial, yet effective innovation. Murad I realized that relying on seasonal cavalry was inefficient for long-term sieges.
So he instituted the Diffsurim system. They would levy a tax on Christian villages in the Balkans, taking a percentage of young male children.
The systematic enslavement of Christian boys.
Yes. These boys were converted to Islam, given an elite education, and trained as a fiercely loyal, salaried infantry force. Because they had no local family ties, their sole allegiance was to the Sultan,
Giving the Ottomans a highly disciplined standing army that the fragmented European forces simply couldn't match.
And with that kind of military machinery, it's no wonder Constantinople ends up completely surrounded.
By the 1390s, Sultan Bayezid Beylice, who's nicknamed the Thunderbolt due to his terrifying speed, begins starving out the city. He builds fortresses to block the sea. It seems like the timer has reached zero.
But just as Constantinople is on the brink of surrendering, an external force radically alters the board. In 1402, a massive comet shaped like a spearhead appears in the sky.
The Torchbearer.
Right. And in the medieval mind, this wasn't just astronomy. It was a terrifying omen foretelling a universal cataclysm.
And the cataclysm actually arrives, but it isn't the fall of Constantinople.
No, it was Timur, the legendary Central Asian conqueror. He viewed the rising Ottoman state as an arrogant upstart challenging his supremacy.
So he invades Anatolia. Bayezid the Thunderbolt is forced to lift the siege of Constantinople to go deal with him.
And at the Battle of Ankara in 1402, Timur's forces completely annihilate the Ottoman army. During the battle, many of the newly conquered Anatolian troops actually defected to Timur's side.
Because they realized the sheer overwhelming force they were up against.
Exactly. Bayezid was captured alive and died in captivity shortly after. This triggered a decade-long civil war between his sons.
So what does this all mean for the Byzantines? I mean, it's like a bloody boxing match where the badly beaten Byzantine fighter is saved by the bell, except the bell is a terrifying Central Asian warlord who happens to walk into the ring and knock out the opponent instead.
That's a great way to put it. It's a profound historical reprieve. Timur's intervention gave the Byzantine Empire 50 extra years of life, half a century.
But the tragedy is they were too structurally weak to capitalize on it, right?
Exactly. They're territorially isolated, their economy was non-existent, and their demographic collapse was irreversible. They couldn't launch a meaningful counteroffensive. They basically just sat behind their walls and watched.
Well, the Ottomans eventually put themselves back together.
The Ottoman state proved incredibly resilient. Their administrative structures in the Balkans held firm during the Civil War.
And when they emerged, they were led by a new generation of rulers.
Right. Highly focused, modernized, and determined to finally eliminate the Byzantine anomaly in the center of their territory.
Which brings us to 1453. The 50-year timer runs out. We arrive at the grand finale. By the time Sultan Mehmed II arrives at the walls, what are we actually looking at? Is this still a thriving metropolis?
Not at all. Constantinople was a hollowed-out shell. The city is a massive fortress that once held nearly 500,000 people. But by 1453, it held barely 50,000 people.
Just living in isolated village clusters among the ancient ruins.
Yeah, and facing them is Mehmed II, who isn't even 21 years old yet. But he is fiercely ambitious, and he knows that the traditional Ottoman tactic of starving the city out is no longer viable.
Because of the risk of a European relief fleet, he needs to physically breach the legendary Theodosian walls.
This is where the gunpowder revolution changes world history. Enter Orban, a Hungarian cannon maker.
I love this detail from the sources because it's the ultimate you get what you pay for historical tragedy.
It really is. Orban was a master engineer, a Christian mercenary looking to sell his revolutionary siege technology. He actually went to the Byzantine court first.
But the Byzantine treasury was so utterly empty, they couldn't even afford to feed him, let alone supply him with the massive amounts of bronze required.
So Orban shrugs, walks across the border to the Ottoman camp, and Mehmed II pays him 4 times his asking price.
Wow.
The resulting technology was terrifying. Orban designed massive bombards that required 60 oxen to move, firing 500-kilogram stone balls from over a mile away.
Rendering 800-year-old multi-tiered stone walls entirely obsolete by the sheer kinetic energy of gunpowder artillery.
It was devastating, but it wasn't just about trying out new weapons. There is a deep theological engine driving this siege.
Right, Muslims viewed the conquest as the fulfillment of prophecies and hadiths from the Prophet Muhammad.
For Mehmed and his troops, breaching those walls wasn't just a political objective. It was about fulfilling a cosmic destiny and securing their place as the universal power of the Islamic world.
So when those walls finally come tumbling down on May 29, 1453, after a brutal 53-day siege, it's not just a city falling.
It sent shockwaves across the globe. For many historians, 1453 marks the definitive end of the Middle Ages. But the Ottomans didn't view themselves as destroyers of the Roman Empire. They believed they were inheriting it.
Mehmed even officially took the title Caesar of Rome, right?
He did. It was a profound cultural fusion, birthing an imperial Ottoman capital that straddled Europe and Asia for the next 4 centuries.
So taking a step back, the fall of Byzantium wasn't a single battle on a Tuesday in 1453. As we've seen, it was a 400-year cascade of devastating blunders and brilliant adaptations.
It was the betrayal at Manzikert, melting down church gold, the shattered economy from the Fourth Crusade.
The horror of the rogue Catalan mercenaries, the strategic genius of Ottoman demographic engineering, giant comet omens, and finally the deafening roar of Hungarian gunpowder.
It stands as a phenomenal case study in how civilizations endure through sheer willpower, adapt, and eventually break under the compounded weight of historical forces.
But I want to leave you with a final lingering thought. Because when the walls fell and the cannons finally went silent in 1453, a haunting piece of folklore emerged among the surviving Greek population.
The myth of the sleeping king.
Yeah, the legends surrounding the final moments of Emperor Constantine Crusaded. The sources note that Constantine's body was never definitively identified in the brutal final melee at the gates.
And from that ambiguity, a myth was born.
The story claimed that the emperor didn't actually die. Instead, as the Ottoman forces closed in, an angel descended from heaven, rescued the emperor, turned him into pure marble, and hid him deep in a secret cave beneath the Golden Gate of the city.
And there, the legend says, the Marble King sleeps, waiting for the day he will awaken, draw his sword, and reclaim his city from the conquerors.
It's a remarkably powerful psychological mechanism for processing profound collective grief.
It really is.
It leaves you wondering. When a civilization faces total annihilation, when the cannonballs finally breach the firewall and the empire takes its last bleeding breath, how much does the survival of its people depend on the beautiful, defiant myths they invent to cope with the end of their world?